What happens when one of the richest men in the world loses everything in a single courtroom decision? When power, influence, and years of work all crumble with the stroke of a judge's gavel? For Elon Musk, this moment came in a way no one could have predicted. Elon sat at the back of the courtroom, a man of almost mythical wealth, yet in this moment, he felt more vulnerable than ever. The air in the room was thick with tension. His legal team had been relentless, confident that they had the case in the bag. But nothing could have prepared them for this. Nothing could have prepared them for Judge Robert Hayes. Judge Hayes had been a figurehead of justice for decades, known for his unwavering commitment to the law, for his decisions that were as harsh as they were fair. But today, that reputation took on a more sinister tone. He had ruled against Musk and his company in a way that shook the very foundation of Silicon Valley. "Mr. Musk," the judge's voice echoed in the silent courtroom, "the court finds you and your companies in direct violation of federal regulations. You are hereby ordered to pay a substantial fine, and more critically, your business operations are to be suspended until further review." The words hit like a tidal wave. Musk's heart skipped a beat as he tried to process what had just happened. The courtroom seemed to blur around him, the faces of his lawyers, the opposing counsel, even the judge, all fading into a single, echoing void. The room felt too small, too suffocating for a man who was used to controlling massive companies, launching rockets, and reshaping entire industries. Elon Musk, a titan of technology and industry, was brought to his knees in an instant. His companies, the very foundation of his empire, were now at the mercy of the judicial system. The fine was only the beginning, a mere fraction of the damage that had just been inflicted upon his businesses, his reputation, and his legacy. His mind raced. There had to be a way out of this. He had faced bigger challenges, more insurmountable obstacles. But this? This felt personal. And this judge, Judge Hayes, seemed to enjoy every moment of it. As the court proceedings drew to a close, Musk remained in his seat, stunned, barely acknowledging the lawyer who spoke urgently in his ear. His thoughts were swirling, grappling with the reality of the situation. Could this be undone? Could he appeal? Was there a backdoor out of this mess? But there was no quick fix. No magic solution. The judge's ruling had the weight of the law behind it, and Musk knew that trying to fight this through traditional means would take time he didn't have. His companies were already reeling from the impact, and the longer the suspension lasted, the more likely they were to suffer irreparable damage. As the room cleared and his legal team huddled, Elon remained seated, his mind working overtime. Anger surged through him, his usual calm demeanor cracking under the weight of betrayal. He'd been fighting for innovation, for the future of humanity, but now it felt like the very system he had worked so hard to change was turning against him. It wasn't just a legal battle anymore. This was about more than business, it was personal. Musk had spent years building something bigger than himself. His companies weren't just a collection of assets, they were the future, the very foundation upon which the next generation of technology would be built. And now, it felt like the rug had been pulled out from under him. The weight of the loss pressed down on him, but there was something else building inside. Something darker. Revenge. The thought flickered in his mind, a fleeting sensation at first, but it took root quickly. Elon had always been a man who thrived under pressure. If anyone could bounce back from a courtroom defeat, it was him. But this time, something was different. This time, the stakes were higher. This wasn't just about business, this was about justice. And, in his mind, this was about showing the world that no one, could take him down. He stood up, shaking off the anger, the frustration. His legal team had started making their way toward him, but he raised a hand to stop them. They would need time to figure out the technicalities, the legal loopholes. But Elon wasn't going to sit around and wait. He was a doer, not a talker. And in that moment, he made a decision. He wasn't just going to fight this. He was going to make Judge Robert Hayes regret the day he ever crossed paths with Elon Musk. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Musk thought, as if talking to an invisible audience. His mind was already racing ahead to the next steps. The public would be watching. This wasn't just about a courtroom battle anymore. This was going to be epic. The world needed to see that no one could knock Elon Musk down, especially not a judge hiding behind a gavel. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the frustration morphed into a cold resolve. He would take revenge, on his terms. The world would soon know what happens when you mess with Elon Musk. He wasn't just going to win this battle. He was going to make it a defining moment of his career. The stakes were set, and the game was on. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Musk didn't know the answer yet. But as he walked out of that courtroom, the seed of his plan had already been planted. And he would not rest until he had his revenge. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk was no stranger to adversity. In fact, adversity had shaped him, honed him into the man he was today. His story wasn't one of smooth sailing or an effortless rise to the top. It was a saga of constant struggle, resilience, and an unyielding drive to defy the odds. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, in 1971, Elon's early life was far from ordinary. His parents, May Musk and Errol Musk, had high expectations for him, but Elon's world was already filled with tension. His parents, both accomplished in their own rights, his father an electromechanical engineer and his mother a dietitian and model, weren't the most affectionate. Elon's father was distant, often critical, and his mother, while loving, struggled to give Elon the kind of emotional support he needed. At an early age, Elon was an outsider, more interested in books and computers than in playing with the other kids. Elon's love for technology started young. By the age of 12, he had taught himself computer programming and created a video game called Blaster, which he sold for $500. It wasn't much money, but it was a sign of things to come. He had discovered the thrill of innovation and the rush of creating something from nothing. But this was also where his drive began, an obsessive hunger to succeed, to prove that he could build something monumental, something the world hadn't seen before. His childhood wasn't without hardship. He was bullied relentlessly in school, something that left deep scars on him. He would often retreat into his own world, focusing on his interests in physics, engineering, and technology. In many ways, this isolation drove him to be the visionary he would later become. Elon learned to rely on himself and his own abilities to survive. After moving to Canada at 17, Elon enrolled at Queen's University before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania in the United States. It was here that he began to understand the enormity of the opportunities in front of him. His time at Penn was marked by late-night discussions with other students, conversations that would plant the seeds for his future ventures. But those early years weren't easy either. There were moments of doubt, days when he questioned whether it was all worth it, when he wasn't sure how he would make ends meet. After graduating, Elon's journey truly began. His first startup, Zip2, was a software company that provided maps and business directories for newspapers. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was successful enough to be sold to Compaq for nearly $300 million. But the taste of success only whetted Elon's appetite for more. With the proceeds from Zip2, he founded X.com, which eventually became PayPal after a merger. PayPal revolutionized online payments, making Elon a multimillionaire at a young age. And just as quickly, he sold it to eBay for $1.5 billion. But Elon wasn't interested in resting on his laurels. He wanted to change the world, not just make money. That's when he turned his focus to space exploration with SpaceX. He poured his fortune into the venture, hoping to fulfill his lifelong dream of making humanity a multiplanetary species. At the same time, he became obsessed with the idea of electric cars and founded Tesla, aiming to make sustainable energy accessible and desirable. Through it all, Elon faced constant obstacles. Tesla was on the verge of bankruptcy multiple times, SpaceX had failed launch after failed launch, and Musk's very public persona often invited ridicule. He was called crazy, reckless, and arrogant by many of his critics. But he didn't care. Each setback only fueled his determination to prove them wrong. In fact, adversity had become his most trusted companion. He thrived on it, because it pushed him to think bigger, to go further than anyone else was willing to. But Elon's life wasn't just about work. There were relationships, too, relationships that were as intense and volatile as his career. He had been married 3 times, twice to actress Tallulah Riley, and once to author Justine Musk. His personal life often made headlines, as did his high-profile relationships with women like Grimes, with whom he shares a child. But, for all the public spectacle of his love life, Elon's focus remained on his vision. In his closest moments with those who knew him best, Elon often spoke about his childhood, his struggles with loneliness, and how those experiences shaped his relentless ambition. He spoke about how his early years left him with a deep sense of needing to prove himself, not to others, but to the universe itself. This drive, this feeling of being misunderstood, became the core of his identity. And it was this part of Elon's character that the world was about to witness firsthand in the courtroom. His public persona, largely shaped by his ventures, was that of a man who was unyielding, driven, and obsessed with the future. But underneath the surface, there was a part of him that still burned with the desire to be understood, to be recognized not just as a businessman but as a visionary who could change the course of human history. The ruling against him had cut deeper than anyone could imagine. It wasn't just the financial penalties or the operational setbacks, it was the personal attack. For a man who had clawed his way to the top, who had revolutionized industries and made breakthroughs that others thought impossible, this court ruling felt like a betrayal. It was a reminder of how fragile even the strongest empires could be. In those quiet moments after the courtroom had emptied, Elon's mind drifted back to his childhood. He could almost hear the voices of the kids who had bullied him, the whispers that followed him down every hallway. "You're not enough," they used to say. And in that moment, as the weight of the judge's ruling settled over him, Elon Musk could feel those same words echoing in the back of his mind. But instead of retreating or backing down, the old fire inside him flared back to life. He wasn't just going to accept this loss. No, this was different. This was personal. He had fought too hard, been through too much, to let some legal decision undo everything he had built. He wasn't going to just win. He was going to make sure that no one ever doubted his power again. He stood up from the chair, his jaw clenched. The gears were already turning in his mind, calculating the next steps, plotting the course for what was about to come. Revenge, as he saw it, wasn't just about getting back at someone, it was about sending a message. And that message was this: never underestimate Elon Musk. The morning after the ruling, Elon Musk was sitting in his office, the sterile white walls of his SpaceX headquarters offering no comfort. The harsh fluorescent lighting cast long shadows over the room, mirroring the dark thoughts swirling in his mind. It felt like he was in a cage, one of his own making. He had been through tough battles before, public scrutiny, failed projects, angry shareholders, but this was different. This was personal. As the news broke, the world's media outlets scrambled to cover the shock ruling. Headlines flashed across screens: Elon Musk loses major court battle, Musk's empire on the brink, courtroom ruling shakes Silicon Valley, all of them designed to capture the sensational nature of his defeat. But they didn't know the half of it. What they didn't know was that this ruling, this decision by Judge Robert Hayes, was only the beginning of a much larger story. Elon leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his desk. His legal team had called him multiple times, but he didn't answer. He didn't need to hear their reassurances. He didn't want to hear about the appeals process or the possibility of a long, drawn-out legal battle. What he needed was something more immediate. Something that would turn the tables in a way no one would see coming. But first, he needed to get the facts straight. The fine, the suspension of his operations, those were just the immediate consequences. The real damage lay in the longer-term impact. Musk's empire was a web of interconnected companies, and each one would suffer under this court order. Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink, his most significant ventures, would now be forced into a state of limbo. Employees would be laid off, investors would panic, and competitors would swoop in like vultures. It wasn't just about the companies anymore. It was about the message being sent by the court. Judge Hayes wasn't just trying to punish a businessman, he was attempting to cripple a vision of a sustainable, spacefaring humanity. And that was something Musk couldn't abide by. A sudden knock on the door broke him from his reverie. "Come in," Elon called, his voice cold but controlled. His legal team walked in, led by his top lawyer, Sarah Collins. She was in her late 40s, sharp as a tack, with a reputation for being able to navigate the most complex legal battles. But even she, with all her experience, couldn't mask the concern in her eyes. "Elon," she said, sitting down across from him, "we've gone over the ruling, and while there are some avenues we can explore to appeal, this could take months, maybe longer. Your businesses can't afford to be sidelined that long. I think it's best we focus on that first." Elon stared at her, unblinking. "I'm not interested in waiting. I'm not going to let him, or anyone, slow me down." Sarah sighed and glanced at the others in the room, who shifted uncomfortably. Elon's demeanor was unlike anything they had seen before. There was a dangerous intensity in his eyes. He wasn't asking for advice anymore, he was planning his next move. "We have options," Sarah said carefully. "But I need you to understand that going outside the legal framework could have catastrophic consequences. You could lose everything." The public loves a comeback story," Elon interrupted, leaning forward. "They'll love this one even more. This is bigger than a courtroom. This is about principle. This is about making sure no one can crush what I've built with the push of a button." There was silence in the room as everyone processed his words. Elon's gaze remained focused on Sarah, but she could see the fire in his eyes. It was the same fire that had led him to take on the world's biggest industries, the same fire that had kept him pushing when everyone else would have quit. "I'm going to make him regret this," Elon muttered under his breath, almost to himself. Sarah's eyes narrowed, but she remained professional. "And how do you propose we do that?" Elon's lips curled into a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "You'll see." The meeting ended shortly after, with Sarah promising to work on finding a legal loophole that could temporarily lift the suspension. But Elon had other plans. He didn't need the legal system to get revenge. If anything, he was about to show the world just how powerless a judge could be in the face of Elon Musk's determination. A few hours later, Elon found himself walking through the halls of Tesla's headquarters. His footsteps echoed in the quiet building as he passed through the corridors, where employees had once greeted him with excitement and admiration. Now, there was only a sense of uncertainty hanging in the air. People were on edge, worried about what would come next. Many of them knew that layoffs were inevitable, that this ruling would ripple through the company and affect every single person working there. Elon stopped in front of a large conference room. Inside, his senior executives were meeting to discuss the fallout from the court's decision. They had been in crisis mode since the news broke, trying to figure out how to keep things running smoothly in the midst of the chaos. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room fell silent as his presence filled the space. His executives looked up, a mix of concern and uncertainty in their eyes. "Gather round," Elon said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "We have a bigger problem now than just a courtroom ruling. The world thinks I've lost. They think my empire is done. But they're wrong." There was a pause before one of his top executives, John Hargrave, spoke up. "Elon, I know you're upset, but we need to focus on keeping Tesla running. We're facing a financial crisis, This ruling could force us into bankruptcy if we don't act fast. Elon's gaze didn't waver. You're missing the point, John. We're not just fighting a financial crisis. We're fighting for the future. This is bigger than Tesla. This is bigger than me. This is about showing the world that no one, not a judge, not a law, not a system, can stop progress. The room fell quiet again. They all knew that once Elon had a vision, there was no turning back. His words hung in the air, heavy with the promise of something monumental. Get ready, Elon said, his voice steady, his eyes burning with resolve. This is just the beginning. The hours following the meeting with his Tesla executives were a blur for Elon Musk. His mind raced with possibilities, all centered around one thing, making the judge regret ever crossing him. He knew the traditional routes of legal appeal and financial negotiations weren't going to be enough. What he needed was something far more audacious, something that would send shockwaves through the system, a statement of power and resilience that no one could ignore. By the time evening fell, Elon was sitting in his private office at SpaceX, alone except for his thoughts. The city of Hawthorne, California, stretched out below him, lights flickering in the distance as he stared out the window. He could almost feel the weight of the world pressing in on him. The legal battle, the media frenzy, the mounting pressure, it was all building to a crescendo. And in that pressure, Elon saw opportunity. He wasn't just going to let the ruling happen quietly. He was going to make it a spectacle, a reminder that his empire was untouchable. But how? The answer came to him in a flash, as clear and inevitable as a rocket launch. The plan was simple but audacious, and most importantly, it would leverage everything he had built so far. The first step. Disrupt the system that had dared to bring him down. The next day, Elon gathered his closest confidants, Sarah Collins, his legal expert, and a few trusted engineers and senior managers from SpaceX and Tesla. The conference room at SpaceX was filled with a mix of people, all of whom had been involved in some of Elon's most ambitious projects. They had seen his capacity to dream big, to take on challenges that others thought impossible. But this? This was something entirely different. I have a plan, Elon said, standing at the head of the table, his voice steady and confident. Everyone looked at him with a mix of curiosity and concern. They had seen Elon take risks before, risks that seemed insane to the outside world, but this felt different. What's your plan, Elon? Sarah asked, her voice calm but tinged with wariness. Elon met her gaze, his expression hardening. We're going to go after Judge Robert Hayes. But not in the way you think. This isn't about a legal fight. This is about undermining everything he stands for. There was a long pause as the room processed his words. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Undermine the judge? How? Elon's lips curled into a slight smile. By making him irrelevant. I'm going to prove that I can not only thrive despite this ruling, but I can do it in a way that makes him and the court system look powerless. I'm going to use everything I've built, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and launch a campaign so disruptive that it will make the ruling look obsolete. Sarah frowned, shaking her head. Elon, I get it. You're angry, but going after the judge in this way could backfire. The media is already painting you as a reckless billionaire. You need to be careful. If you escalate this too much. Trust me, Elon cut her off. This isn't about recklessness. This is about showing the world that the system can't control me. I want to make a statement, and I need your help to do it. The team around the table shifted uneasily. This was Elon Musk they were dealing with, his ambition was boundless, his vision often far ahead of the curve. But this? This felt dangerous, even for him. But one thing was clear, when Elon Musk made up his mind, nothing could stop him. The team had no choice but to rally behind him. The first part of Elon's plan was to use the global reach of his companies to create a media storm. His Twitter account alone had over 100 million followers, and Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink had millions more. His influence was unparalleled. The message had to be clear, simple, and unrelenting. The court ruling had not affected his vision, and it would not stop progress. Within hours, Elon began tweeting. He tweeted about the court ruling, but instead of engaging in a bitter tirade against the judge or the legal system, he made it about something bigger, something far more compelling. The future of humanity will not be decided by a courtroom. It will be decided by those who dare to push the boundaries. The tweet was a call to arms for the dreamers, the innovators, the rebels who believed in progress above all else. It was a challenge to the system, to the establishment that had tried to tear him down. It resonated deeply with his followers. People weren't just rooting for him, they were rooting for the idea of a world where individuals like Elon Musk could shape the future, unencumbered by outdated laws and limitations. Within hours, news outlets picked up the tweet. Journalists, bloggers, and influencers shared it, adding their own commentary and analysis. Some praised Elon for his vision and resilience, while others criticized him for using his platform to lash out at the legal system. But one thing was certain, the world was paying attention. Elon didn't stop there. Over the next few days, he began to make bold moves. SpaceX, which had been in the midst of developing its next-generation Mars mission, accelerated its timeline. A new rocket prototype was unveiled, and SpaceX announced that it would conduct a historic test flight to orbit within weeks, a mission that had originally been slated for months down the road. The message? The ruling couldn't stop SpaceX from reaching new heights. Tesla, meanwhile, announced the launch of a new, fully electric vehicle that was designed for the masses, an affordable, sustainable car that would revolutionize the auto industry. In a bold move, Tesla also revealed that it would be expanding its manufacturing plants in areas unaffected by the court's decision, showcasing its ability to adapt and grow no matter the challenges. And then came Neuralink. Musk's neurotechnology company unveiled a new breakthrough, a brain-machine interface that could allow patients with severe neurological disorders to regain control of their motor functions. This wasn't just a technological achievement, it was a message to the world that nothing, not even a court ruling, could stop the march of progress. But all of these moves were just the beginning. The true test was how the media, and most importantly, Judge Robert Hayes, would respond. Elon knew that if he could make the judge's actions seem irrelevant, he could win. But it wouldn't be easy. The public had already turned their eyes to the courtroom, watching for any signs of weakness or hesitation in the judge's ruling. The media had already started to speculate on what the fallout would be for Musk's companies, and many wondered whether this ruling would mark the beginning of the end for the tech mogul's empire. But Elon wasn't concerned about the fallout. He was concerned about making sure that Hayes and everyone else in the legal system knew one thing. Elon Musk could not be controlled. It was only a matter of days before Elon Musk's audacious moves began to capture the world's attention. What started as a single tweet, the future of humanity will not be decided by a courtroom. It will be decided by those who dare to push the boundaries, had snowballed into a global media firestorm. The world was watching, some in disbelief, others in awe, but no one was indifferent. The judge, Robert Hayes, had been largely silent since the ruling, but now, it seemed inevitable that he would have to respond. The pressure was mounting, and Elon knew it. But for him, this was more than just a public relations battle. This was about something far deeper, his vision of the future, the dream of making humanity a multiplanetary species, and the realization that no one, no matter how powerful, had the right to stand in the way. Elon's day had begun like any other. The sun was still rising over the horizon as he walked into Tesla's new headquarters in Austin, Texas, a sleek, modern building designed to symbolize the future. He had just flown in from SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, and there was a palpable sense of energy in the air. Employees, who had once whispered about his eccentricities and unpredictable nature, now spoke of him with admiration. To them, Elon was a symbol of defiance against the establishment, an unstoppable force with the power to turn dreams into reality. But the pressure was building in ways that even he couldn't have predicted. By the time he reached his office, his phone buzzed incessantly. Tweets were coming in faster than he could read them. The media was running with the story of his rebellion against the system. Analysts, reporters, even critics were weighing in on his next move. And among the chatter, one voice stood out: Judge Robert Hayes, the man who had handed down the controversial ruling, had finally spoken. The statement was brief, but its impact was immediate. Elon Musk's actions are an affront to the rule of law. His refusal to abide by a legal decision will not go unchallenged. I will continue to hold him accountable for the damages his actions have caused. The public response was a mixture of surprise and outrage. Many had assumed the judge would remain silent, content with the legal victory. But now, it was clear, the battle had escalated. Elon didn't flinch when he saw the tweet. He had been anticipating this. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled together in thought. The message from Judge Hayes was exactly what he needed. It was a signal that the system was doubling down, refusing to acknowledge that Elon Musk, against all odds, was still pushing forward. And now, Musk would turn the judge's words into fuel for his fire. He called a meeting with his inner circle, including Sarah Collins, his legal advisor, and the executives leading the various companies under his umbrella. They were all aware that the stakes had risen dramatically. This wasn't just about a legal victory anymore, it was a battle for the very future of innovation. We need to respond, Elon said, his voice calm but charged with intensity. Hayes has made it personal. He's not just trying to limit me, he's trying to limit all of us. And we're not going to let that happen. Sarah Collins nodded slowly, her mind working through the legal ramifications. But we have to be careful, Elon. This isn't just about making a statement anymore. The court will be watching every move we make. If we go too far, we risk everything. Elon's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he was silent. Then, his lips parted in a faint, knowing smile. I've already made my statement, he said quietly. Now, it's time to make history. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. In a bold move, Elon announced a new initiative, one that would make waves far beyond the tech world. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and even his boring company would join forces on a groundbreaking new project, a global effort to create a network of sustainable, self-sufficient cities on Earth, with a long-term goal of colonizing Mars. The announcement was designed to remind the world that no ruling, no judge, could stop the vision of a future where humanity would thrive beyond the constraints of Earth. But the most shocking part of Elon's plan? He was going to unveil a new partnership with multiple governments, an unprecedented collaboration between private enterprise and global authorities. He had already secured agreements with several nations, including the United States, Japan, and several European Union countries, to create the first of these cities. The message was clear: the legal battle didn't matter anymore. The future was being built right now, with or without the court's approval. Elon released the news on Twitter with a single line: the future of humanity isn't up for debate. It's happening. The announcement was met with a mix of awe and skepticism. Was it too ambitious? Was Elon really prepared to push forward with such a grand vision? The media couldn't get enough. Headlines flooded every outlet, and social media exploded with reactions. Some hailed Elon as a visionary, while others questioned the feasibility of such an undertaking. But no one could ignore him. And then came the judge's response. Judge Robert Hayes, now facing an onslaught of criticism for his ruling, issued a statement of his own: Elon Musk's reckless behavior continues to demonstrate a disregard for the law. This self-proclaimed visionary has made it clear he intends to operate outside the bounds of society. His actions will have consequences, and I will ensure he is held accountable. The judge's words struck like a hammer, but they had an unintended effect. They only further galvanized Musk supporters and fueled the growing media frenzy. Elon wasn't just fighting a legal battle anymore. He was battling a system that seemed intent on stifling innovation and progress. He was fighting for a future where humanity's potential could be realized without the shackles of bureaucracy and outdated regulations. That night, as Elon sat in his office, watching the storm unfold around him, a sense of calm washed over him. He was no longer just a billionaire fighting for the survival of his companies. He was a symbol of defiance, of resilience, and of the unstoppable force of human ambition. But the journey was just beginning. The shockwaves from his latest move had barely begun to ripple across the world, and the emotional impact of it was far from over. The court battle with Judge Hayes was about to take an even darker turn. The whirlwind of media attention didn't die down in the days following Elon Musk's bold announcement. If anything, it only grew more intense. His tweet about building self-sufficient cities and collaborating with governments across the globe resonated with people far beyond the tech world. In some circles, it was hailed as an unprecedented move toward the future of humanity, in others, it was seen as the ultimate expression of hubris. But Elon Musk didn't care about the opinions of the critics. What mattered was that the world was paying attention. But as the excitement grew, so did the mounting tension. Judge Robert Hayes, who had already expressed his disdain for Musk's antics, became the central figure in the growing narrative. The judge's every move was now being scrutinized with the kind of intensity usually reserved for political leaders. In the legal world, a storm was brewing. Hayes had already made it clear that he would not let Musk's actions go unchecked, and he was preparing for a legal counteroffensive. He issued a formal statement that confirmed what many had already suspected: he was moving to freeze Musk's assets and launch a full investigation into his financial dealings. It was a move that sent shockwaves through the media and sent Musk's team scrambling. Elon didn't flinch when he heard the news. If anything, it made him more determined. He had expected this retaliation. He had anticipated the legal system's attempt to use the courts as a tool to rein him in, but Musk wasn't the type to back down from a fight. This was exactly what he wanted. The move to freeze his assets, however, was a serious threat. With billions tied up in Tesla, SpaceX, and his various other ventures, this was a direct challenge to his ability to continue pushing forward with his vision. But it also presented an opportunity, one that Elon wasn't going to let slip by. At his headquarters in Austin, Texas, Elon paced back and forth in his office, looking out over the sprawling construction site that would one day house Tesla's most advanced battery factory. The future of his empire rested on this project, but so did everything else. If the court froze his assets, it would be a catastrophic blow, but it would also give him the perfect chance to dismantle the system that had sought to control him. Sarah, Elon called, without turning around. Sarah Collins, his legal advisor and longtime confidant, entered the room, a look of concern on her face. She had been working around the clock to manage the mounting legal threats, but she could sense the storm that was brewing. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. This was a war. Elon, we need to talk about the latest ruling. Hayes is serious about freezing your assets, and it's only a matter of time before it happens. We have to be prepared. Her voice was steady but carried an undertone of worry. Elon nodded slowly, his face unreadable. He was calculating his next move, weighing the risks and the rewards. I'm not worried about the freeze, he said, his voice calm but firm. I've already thought of that. If they freeze my assets, it's only going to make my point more compelling. This is exactly what I want. Sarah's brow furrowed. What are you talking about? Think about it, Elon said, turning to face her. The system, courts, regulators, governments, they've all been treating me like a problem to be solved. A threat to their control. But what if I turn the tables on them? What if I make them the ones who are exposed? They've always seen themselves as the ones in power. It's time to show the world that they are the ones who are weak. Sarah paused, digesting his words. How do you plan to do that? Elon smiled, his eyes gleaming with the intensity of someone who was already steps ahead in the game. It's simple. I'm going to let them think they're in control. But while they're distracted by the legal battle, I'll push forward with my real mission, launching a campaign that disrupts not just the legal system, but the entire way society operates. If they think they can freeze my assets, they're going to find out just how small their reach is. As Sarah left to begin preparing for the legal challenges, Elon made a series of phone calls. He contacted his trusted partners across his companies, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and Boring Company. He made it clear that the coming months would be critical, and they needed to be prepared to face a new kind of challenge. While the world focused on the courtroom drama, Elon was already executing the next phase of his plan, leveraging the full potential of his companies to create an ecosystem that would thrive regardless of any external pressure. His companies were already self-sustaining in many ways, but it was time to take things to the next level. The freeze on his assets, if it came to pass, would only catalyze the restructuring he had in mind. He would decentralize control, create a network that was too expansive and too interconnected for any one entity, whether it was a judge, a government, or even the public, to take down. Meanwhile, news of the legal battle was dominating headlines. Wall Street analysts predicted that the freezing of Musk's assets would send shockwaves through the global markets, especially Tesla's stock, which had already seen significant volatility in the wake of his recent outbursts. But Elon was unfazed. In fact, he saw the drop in Tesla's stock price as another opportunity. As his legal battle with Judge Hayes heated up, Musk made a bold move. He secretly purchased a large chunk of Tesla's stock, using his own funds to double down on his belief in the company's future. This move caused even more chaos in the financial world. Speculators were left wondering if Musk was trying to secure control of his company before the legal system could interfere. But as always, Elon was playing a long game. He wasn't worried about short-term fluctuations. He was thinking about the bigger picture. As the days passed, the tension between Elon and Judge Hayes reached a boiling point. The legal system was gearing up for a full assault on Musk's empire, and the next few weeks would determine everything. It was no longer just about the ruling, it was about exposing the inherent flaws in the system that sought to control progress. The shockwaves from the impending battle were only just beginning. That night, as Elon sat alone in his office, reviewing plans for the new self-sufficient city initiative, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. The legal battle was now just a backdrop to something much larger, much more important. He was no longer just fighting for his companies. He was fighting for a future that no one, no matter how powerful, could hold back. The court's decision, the assets freeze, Judge Hayes, it was all just noise now. The real game had begun. The pressure was mounting on all fronts, but Elon Musk was a master of turning adversity into an advantage. The legal battle with Judge Robert Hayes had taken on a life of its own, but now, as public opinion shifted in his favor, Musk began to realize something crucial: this was not just a fight for his companies. It was a fight for the very idea of innovation itself, and he was not about to let the judicial system, or anyone else, derail his vision. Elon had already anticipated the freeze on his assets. It was an obvious move, and one that he knew would come as a direct response to his refusal to comply with the court's ruling. But instead of succumbing to the threat, he decided to turn it into an opportunity to demonstrate just how far-reaching his influence had become. In the weeks since his bold announcement about self-sufficient cities and Mars colonization, Musk had been quietly working behind the scenes. His companies were already creating new technologies at a pace faster than anyone could keep up with. But now, he needed something more, a counterattack that would not only secure his place in history but disrupt the very system that sought to keep him in check. The strategy was simple, yet brilliant: turn the legal battle into a platform for innovation. The first step of his plan was to release a series of high-profile announcements, timed perfectly to coincide with Judge Hayes's increasing pressure on Musk. These weren't just product launches or new technology announcements, they were strategic moves to create such a large impact that it would be impossible for anyone to ignore him. If the judge and the legal system wanted to keep attacking, Elon would keep pushing forward with more groundbreaking innovations. His companies would be so intertwined with the future of humanity that no one, not even a judge, could deny them. The first salvo in this counterattack was the Tesla Solar Grid Initiative, a global plan to provide cheap, renewable energy to underserved areas of the world, funded entirely by Tesla. The idea was simple: use Tesla's solar technology to create sustainable energy networks that would allow entire countries and communities to become energy independent. The project was unveiled with a video that captured Musk standing in front of solar panels, speaking directly to the camera. "We are standing at the crossroads of a new era. A new era where energy isn't a commodity. It's a human right. The future belongs to those who can harness the power of the sun and give it to the people. This is Tesla's gift to the world." The announcement reverberated across the globe. It was not only a game-changer for energy access, but it also directly challenged those who would oppose progress. As the project gained traction, Musk's reputation as a visionary was solidified further. The media could no longer deny that his focus was on making a positive impact, not just building an empire. Meanwhile, Judge Hayes's legal team was pushing forward with their case, which was progressing to the point of holding a formal hearing in front of a larger panel of judges. Musk's legal team was well prepared, but the pressure was mounting, and every day that passed seemed to see another legal obstacle thrown in his path. But what Hayes hadn't accounted for was Musk's next move, a major announcement by SpaceX. Elon's aerospace company had already captured global attention with its successful rocket launches and ambitions to colonize Mars. But Musk was about to change the game once again. He announced that SpaceX would be launching the first commercial space station for research and development, aimed at advancing humanity's capabilities for deep space exploration. The space station, which was expected to be operational within the next 5 years, would serve as a hub for scientific discoveries, as well as a stepping stone for future missions to Mars. In his typical style, Elon didn't just announce the station. He promised that the first 100 people to volunteer for the mission would receive free lifetime access to Mars, making it the ultimate frontier for humanity. The future is in the stars. It always has been. SpaceX is creating the path, and you have the chance to be among the first to walk it. The question is, will you seize it, or will you sit by while others make history? The media was captivated, and critics of Elon Musk were left scrambling. It was one thing to push the envelope with electric cars and solar energy, but space? Now Musk was tapping into something deeper, something that no one could ignore. The more Musk innovated, the harder it became for anyone to dismiss him as just a tech mogul with an ego. He was becoming a symbol, a living, breathing representation of human ambition. But the real shockwave came next. Just as Musk's plans were unfolding in the public eye, his legal team revealed that they had uncovered a potentially catastrophic conflict of interest on Judge Hayes's part. During a deep dive into Hayes's financial history, they discovered that the judge had made millions in personal investments linked to fossil fuel companies, entities that were diametrically opposed to Musk's sustainable energy goals. This revelation wasn't just a scandal, it was explosive. The next day, Elon posted a tweet that shook the foundation of the entire legal system. Judge Robert Hayes has been receiving payments from fossil fuel giants, companies that will lose billions if clean energy takes off. Is this what justice looks like? Let the people decide. Within hours, news outlets were reporting the story. The conflict of interest was undeniable, and the public's perception of Hayes took a nosedive. Was the judge's ruling truly impartial, or had it been influenced by his financial ties to industries that would be directly threatened by Musk's initiatives? The implications were enormous. Suddenly, Judge Hayes's credibility was in question, and his previous rulings, including the one against Musk, were now under intense scrutiny. Legal experts began questioning whether any decision made by Hayes could be trusted. Musk's counterattack had worked beyond his wildest expectations. By exposing the judge's corruption, he had not only deflected the immediate threat but also put the entire legal system on notice. The battle had shifted from a personal fight between Elon Musk and Judge Hayes to a larger, global conversation about the forces that were trying to hold back progress. By the time the legal hearing was set to take place, the mood had changed. What had once been a straightforward court case was now a full-blown spectacle. News organizations around the world were covering every move Musk made, and Judge Hayes was under intense pressure to step down. Meanwhile, Musk, ever the strategist, had already moved on to the next phase of his plan. SpaceX's space station project was already gaining momentum, and his other ventures were continuing to evolve. Elon was no longer just a businessman. He had become the embodiment of human ingenuity, a symbol of defiance against the status quo. And as the world continued to watch, Elon Musk was ready to prove that nothing, not even the legal system, could hold him back. The legal firestorm surrounding Elon Musk and Judge Hayes had reached a boiling point. The media was in overdrive, and every outlet, from tech blogs to international news organizations, was covering the shocking revelation of Judge Hayes's financial ties to fossil fuel companies. What had started as a legal battle between a billionaire entrepreneur and a court system that seemed determined to rein him in had transformed into a global spectacle, with Musk at the center of it all. Elon, however, was never one to shy away from the limelight. He thrived on it. The controversy surrounding Judge Hayes only fueled his drive, giving him a platform to promote his larger vision. While the world watched the courtroom drama unfold, Musk continued to push forward with his ambitious projects, strategically releasing one announcement after another. He knew that while the legal battle was important, it was the battle for public perception that would ultimately decide his fate. The immediate response to the judge's conflict of interest was swift and intense. Public opinion turned sharply against Hayes, with social media users calling for his resignation and for an investigation into the legitimacy of his rulings. People felt betrayed, as though the very institution meant to serve as a check on power had been corrupted by outside interests. In the wake of the scandal, Musk's approval ratings soared. His Twitter account, already a powerful tool for shaping public discourse, became a beacon for those who saw him as the underdog, the man standing up against an unjust system. Supporters flooded social media with hashtags like #MuskForJustice and #EndCorruptionInTheCourts. They saw Musk not just as a tech mogul but as a champion of the people, someone who was fighting to ensure that innovation and progress could flourish without interference from outdated systems. News outlets that had once been skeptical of Musk's ambitious plans now found themselves in the uncomfortable position of having to support his broader message. After all, how could they ignore the irony of a judge who had financial ties to the very industries Musk was trying to dismantle? The global response to Musk's vision for the future of humanity was equally divided. On one side, tech enthusiasts, environmental advocates, and young idealists rallied behind Musk's bold goals of colonizing Mars and building self-sufficient cities on Earth. They saw Musk as a visionary, a man who was pushing the boundaries of what was possible in ways no one else dared to. On the other side, critics were more vocal than ever. They accused Musk of being a self-serving billionaire with little regard for the consequences of his actions. The legal challenges he faced only intensified the debate. Was Musk's quest for a new world built on the ideals of progress, or was it driven by a desire for control and power? Musk, ever the provocateur, reveled in the chaos. He knew that every headline, every tweet, every debate about him and his projects was helping to further cement his place in the public consciousness. To Musk, this was not just about business or technology, it was about reshaping the very fabric of society, and he wasn't going to let anything, least of all a corrupt judge, stand in his way. While the legal world was embroiled in controversy, Musk's other companies were not sitting idly by. Tesla had recently announced a breakthrough in battery technology, which promised to significantly lower the cost of energy storage while improving efficiency. The new battery technology was touted as a game changer, capable of accelerating the world's transition to renewable energy. At the same time, SpaceX had made a major leap forward with its plans for the Starship project, the next generation of spacecraft designed for deep space travel. Musk had already promised that Starship would be capable of carrying humans to Mars, but the new designs promised something even more extraordinary: the ability to send a spacecraft to the outer planets of our solar system. The project's ambition was so bold, so grand, that it was hard for anyone, no matter how skeptical, to ignore the implications. With the media's attention now squarely on Musk, SpaceX's progress was catapulted into the spotlight. The company's recent successes were being lauded not just for their technical achievements, but for their potential to transform the future of humanity. It was no longer just about going to Mars. Musk's vision had expanded to include the possibility of interplanetary colonization. For the first time in history, it seemed like the dream of humans living on another planet was within reach. But despite the wave of public support Musk was receiving, the legal challenges were far from over. The court battle was intensifying, and now, even as public opinion swung in his favor, Musk's legal team was bracing for the next phase of the trial. Hayes had not yet been removed from the case, and despite the growing backlash, the judge was determined to press on with his attempts to freeze Musk's assets. In a strategic move, Elon Musk began speaking out more openly about the flaws in the judicial system, particularly in how it related to innovation and entrepreneurship. In a series of high-profile interviews, Musk argued that the legal system was fundamentally outdated and incapable of handling the rapid pace of technological advancement. The courts were built to deal with the problems of the past, not the future, Musk said in one such interview. When you're dealing with a system that's trying to control innovation, that's trying to hold back progress, you're going to run into problems. The courts weren't made for people like me. But that's why we need to change them. We need to break free from these chains. The more Musk spoke out, the more the media and public began to view him as a visionary not just in technology, but in the realm of societal reform. People were starting to believe that Musk was on the verge of something bigger than any single product or company. He was becoming a symbol of the fight against bureaucracy, against the forces that sought to limit human potential. At the same time, the pressure on Judge Hayes was increasing. His public image had been irreparably damaged, and it seemed only a matter of time before he would be forced to recuse himself from the case. The conflict of interest surrounding his ties to the fossil fuel industry had become too much for even the most entrenched defenders of the judiciary to ignore. Legal experts predicted that the judge would be forced to step down, and with that, Musk's legal team would have the opportunity to fight the case on more even footing. Elon knew this would be a pivotal moment. If the judge were removed, it would signal a significant victory, not just in the courtroom, but in the broader fight for justice and accountability. And if Hayes wasn't removed, it would only serve to reinforce Musk's message that the system was fundamentally broken. Either way, Musk was ready to continue the fight, whatever the outcome. With the battle for public perception firmly in his grasp, Musk's next move was to further disrupt the status quo. While the legal system focused on him, Musk turned his attention back to his vision. His companies were flourishing, and the public was behind him more than ever before. Now, he had the opportunity to create something truly world-changing. As the courtroom drama escalated, so did the stakes. The world was watching every move Elon Musk made in his battle against Judge Robert Hayes. The legal conflict that had once seemed like a routine corporate skirmish was now a global spectacle, and Musk was right at the center of it. The unprecedented exposure, however, was not without consequences. The pressure on Musk to win the case, to emerge victorious not only in court but also in the court of public opinion, had never been higher. Musk was no stranger to pressure. He had faced impossible odds before and had come out on top. Whether it was the creation of Tesla's electric vehicles, SpaceX's breakthrough in reusable rockets, or his commitment to solar energy, Musk had always found a way to disrupt industries and challenge the status quo. But this time, it felt different. The personal stakes were higher. His legacy, his vision for the future, and his companies were all hanging in the balance. And it wasn't just Judge Hayes who stood in his way, it was a system, an entire establishment, that was determined to push him down. The courtroom had become a battleground for ideas, not just laws. The tension was palpable as Musk's legal team presented evidence of Judge Hayes's financial ties to fossil fuel companies. The corruption of the system was no longer a vague allegation, it was a confirmed reality. Yet, despite the mounting evidence and the public outcry, Hayes remained unmoved. He refused to step down, continuing to preside over the case with a sense of unwavering arrogance that only deepened the public's disdain for him. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court, I am confident in my ability to render a fair judgment," Judge Hayes declared, his voice heavy with self-assurance. His eyes flicked over to Musk, sitting in the defendant's chair, a calm expression on his face, despite the battle raging around him. "Let the facts speak for themselves." Musk didn't flinch. He had seen this kind of defiance before, seen it from governments, from corporations, and from people who didn't want to accept change. But he also knew that facts had a way of coming to light, no matter how hard people tried to suppress them. He wasn't about to let Hayes continue to manipulate the system for his own gain. The turning point came during a high-stakes hearing that would determine whether the legal battle would proceed or whether Musk's assets would be permanently frozen. As the case unfolded, Musk's legal team made an unexpected discovery, a critical piece of evidence that could change the entire trajectory of the case. The moment was shocking, not just for Musk, but for everyone present in the courtroom. A whistleblower from within the court system had come forward, revealing that Hayes had been using his position to influence the outcomes of other high-profile cases, including decisions that benefited his personal business interests. The whistleblower's testimony was explosive, and it sent shockwaves through the courtroom. The judge's credibility was now irreparably damaged, and it seemed as though Musk's case was about to take a dramatic turn in his favor. But just as Musk's legal team celebrated the breakthrough, the unthinkable happened. Betrayal from within. Musk's lead attorney, the one person he had trusted above all others, suddenly turned on him. In a shocking move, his attorney publicly announced that he was stepping down from the case, citing irreconcilable differences with Musk's approach. The legal world was stunned. How could someone so deeply involved in the fight for justice abandon their client at such a critical moment? Musk's face betrayed no emotion as he watched his attorney walk out of the courtroom. The man had been a close confidant, someone Musk had relied on to guide him through the complexities of the legal system. To have him leave now, in the middle of the most important case of Musk's career, felt like a gut punch. But Musk wasn't one to let personal betrayals distract him. He knew that this was just another challenge to overcome, another obstacle to his larger vision. As his legal team scrambled to find a replacement, Musk sat silently, his mind already racing ahead. He couldn't afford to let this setback derail him. If anything, it only made his resolve stronger. The betrayal, the corruption, the system itself, it was all part of the fight. The days following the attorney's departure were filled with uncertainty. News outlets speculated about the reasons behind the shocking move. Was it a matter of principle, or was there something deeper at play? Was Musk's relentless pursuit of progress too much for even his most loyal supporters to handle? The questions swirled in the media, but Musk remained focused. Despite the turmoil, Musk had one advantage that no one could take away from him, the truth. And the truth was on his side. The evidence against Judge Hayes was damning, and Musk's commitment to innovation and progress was unwavering. But as the trial date approached, a sense of urgency settled in. He needed to act, and he needed to act fast. Musk's response to the betrayal came swiftly. He hired a new legal team, one that had a reputation for shaking up the establishment. This was no longer a fight to protect his assets, it was a fight to change the very structure of the system that sought to hold him back. Musk's new attorneys had one goal: to expose the full extent of the corruption within the legal system and ensure that Hayes was removed from the case once and for all. In a dramatic move, Musk made a public announcement. Standing before a crowd of supporters, he declared that the fight was no longer just about him, it was about everyone who had ever been held back by outdated systems, by corrupt institutions, and by those who feared change. This is not just my battle. This is the battle for every entrepreneur, every innovator, every dreamer who has ever been told that their ideas are too big, too bold, too impossible. We will not let them hold us back. This fight is about a new world, a better world, a world where progress is not stifled by greed or corruption. The crowd erupted in applause, and Musk's message resonated more than ever. His vision for a new future was bigger than any legal case, any courtroom drama. He was fighting for something much greater than himself. As the case progressed, the tension continued to build. The world was watching, and the question on everyone's mind was whether Musk could overcome the final obstacle, Judge Hayes. Would Musk's strategy be enough to remove Hayes from the case, or would the judge continue to wield his power, determined to see Musk fail? With the final hearing scheduled, Musk knew that the next few days would be crucial. The fight was far from over, and the outcome was uncertain. But one thing was clear, Musk was ready to fight until the very end, no matter the cost. The courtroom had never felt so tense. The eyes of the world were fixed on the battle between Elon Musk and Judge Robert Hayes. After the shocking betrayal from Musk's lead attorney, the air was thick with uncertainty. But Musk was never one to shrink from adversity. In fact, he thrived in moments like this, when the odds seemed impossible, when the stakes were at their highest, and when it looked like the world might be against him. His new legal team had quickly been assembled, some of the brightest and most aggressive lawyers in the country, each of them renowned for their unorthodox methods and fearless strategies. But even they were beginning to feel the pressure. Time was running out, and they needed a game changer. Musk was not a man who believed in conventional solutions. He was a disruptor. He had made his career by doing the impossible, and now, more than ever, he had to do it again. Musk sat alone in his office, staring at the glowing screen of his laptop. The usual hum of activity in his companies, SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, felt distant. His mind wasn't on Mars or electric cars, it was focused solely on the fight ahead. His thoughts were interrupted by the faint ping of an incoming message. It was from Kara, his most trusted advisor and someone who had been by his side through thick and thin. "We need to get ahead of this, Elon. We have to make a move, now. We can't let Hayes control the narrative any longer." "You know what I'm thinking." Musk immediately responded. "You think it's time?" Kara's reply was brief but sharp, "It's time." Elon Musk had a reputation for thinking several steps ahead. He didn't just react to events, he anticipated them, often before anyone else saw what was coming. Now, he was about to take the boldest step of his career, one that would completely change the course of the trial, the media narrative, and possibly the future of his companies. The plan was simple but radical. Musk would turn the tables on Judge Hayes. Instead of continuing to play defense, he would launch a counterattack that not only removed Hayes from the case but exposed the corruption in the judicial system for the world to see. He would take the battle to the public square, using his influence, his resources, and his tech empire to make the judge's removal a necessity in the eyes of the law and the public. The first part of the plan was to make an unprecedented move. Musk, with the full backing of his legal team, would file a motion for Hayes' immediate removal from the case on the grounds of judicial misconduct, citing his conflict of interest and the new evidence provided by the whistleblower. It was a straightforward legal maneuver, but the real power of the move lay in its timing. The second part was where Musk's genius for media manipulation came into play. The moment the motion was filed, Musk would take to social media, specifically, Twitter, to launch an all-out public relations blitz. He would present the facts as they were, no spin, no exaggeration, just the truth, as ugly as it was for the judicial system. His message would be simple: the legal system was broken, and Judge Hayes was a symptom of a much larger issue. The legal team worked quickly. By the time the motion was filed, Musk had already begun drafting his tweet. In the early hours of the morning, after a restless night, he pressed send. His tweet read: "The judicial system has failed us. Corruption and conflict of interest have no place in a court of law. Today, we begin the fight to restore justice. #Musk versus corruption, #Justice for Innovation." The impact was immediate. Musk's followers, already loyal and vocal, exploded into action. The hashtag Musk versus corruption began trending worldwide, as millions of people, tech enthusiasts, environmental activists, and everyday citizens, rallied behind Musk's cause. For them, this wasn't just a legal battle, it was a fight for a better, more transparent system. But the real genius of Musk's move lay in the details. He didn't just attack Judge Hayes, he attacked the very foundation of a system that had too often stifled progress, innovation, and change. He painted himself as a champion of the people, someone who was standing up against the corrupt powers that had held back progress for far too long. As Musk's tweet circulated, news outlets began to pick up the story. The message spread like wildfire across social media. The more the public dug into the details, the more they realized the magnitude of the corruption. Hayes wasn't just a corrupt judge, he was part of a larger network of corporate interests that had been using the courts to shape the future in their favor, stifling innovation and progress. Musk's bold move was not without its risks. His attack on the judicial system, combined with his direct assault on Judge Hayes, had the potential to backfire. It was possible that Hayes would dig in his heels and become even more entrenched in his position, but Musk wasn't worried about that. The public was on his side, and the public was powerful. Even if the legal system failed him, he had something more important, he had the people. For the first time in the trial, Musk was no longer on the defensive. He was in control, dictating the terms of the debate. Every new revelation, every new piece of evidence, every new tweet from Musk only further tilted the scales in his favor. His new legal team, fueled by his unwavering confidence, moved quickly to reinforce the case against Hayes. As the days passed, Musk's influence continued to grow. His campaign against corruption became a full-blown movement, one that resonated with people across the globe. He had successfully reframed the narrative. This wasn't just about a billionaire versus a judge, it was about a battle for the future of humanity. Judge Hayes, meanwhile, was becoming more and more isolated. The media was no longer focused on Musk's legal troubles, they were focused on the corruption of the judge. The walls were closing in, and it seemed like only a matter of time before Hayes would be forced to recuse himself or be removed from the case entirely. But Musk wasn't waiting around for that to happen. His legal team filed motions, issued press releases, and continued to gather public support. The movement was picking up speed, and it was clear that Musk's plan had worked. The system was being forced to respond. And then, the unthinkable happened. Judge Hayes, under intense pressure from both the legal system and public opinion, suddenly announced that he would recuse himself from the case, citing personal reasons and the public nature of the controversy surrounding him. The courtroom erupted in stunned silence. For Musk, this was a victory, not just for him, but for everyone who had ever been held back by a corrupt system. Hayes was out. The next phase of the trial would proceed without the judge who had tried to stop him. Musk stood up, a slight smile playing at the corners of his lips. He had done it. But this was just the beginning. The real battle was still ahead, one that would determine the fate of his companies, his legacy, and the future of innovation itself. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The courtroom had barely settled and the ripple effect of Musk's victory began to shake the very foundations of the legal system. Judge Hayes was out, an unexpected move that sent shockwaves through the judicial community. The public cheered, the media celebrated, and Elon Musk supporters hailed his triumph as a victory for the future, for progress, and for innovation. It seemed like the world was finally waking up to the corruption that had long been buried under layers of bureaucracy and corporate influence. But as any strategist knows, a victory is only as strong as the moves that follow it. Musk's enemies, those entrenched in the system he was working so hard to dismantle, were not going to simply roll over. The removal of Hayes was not the end of the battle, it was merely the beginning of a new phase, one that Musk wasn't fully prepared for. The day after Hayes' recusal, Musk was sitting in a meeting with his legal team, discussing the next steps. The atmosphere was tense but optimistic. They had just won a major battle, and now the next task was to ensure that the trial continued in their favor. "We've done it," Elon, Kara, his top advisor, said, her voice tinged with excitement. "Hayes is out. We've got momentum. We can finally take this thing to trial without him standing in the way." Musk nodded but didn't look convinced. There was a deep frown on his face, a furrow that suggested something was weighing on his mind. "It's not over yet," he said, his voice steady. "Hayes may be out of the picture, but there's more to this than just removing him. We've exposed a crack in the system, and I'm betting they'll try to close it fast." His team agreed, but none of them could foresee just how quickly the system would fight back. It wasn't long before the shockwave of Hayes's removal reached the higher echelons of power, and those who had supported him were ready to strike back. The very next day, Musk received a call from one of his most trusted insiders, someone within the legal system who had been providing him with intelligence from the start. "Elon, brace yourself," the voice on the other end of the line warned. "Hayes is not just going to walk away quietly. He's preparing a counterattack, an appeal to the Supreme Court to reinstate him on the case. And he's not going to do it alone. He's got powerful allies backing him up." Musk's jaw clenched. "The Supreme Court?" he asked, his voice low with disbelief. "This isn't just about Hayes anymore, is it?" The insider confirmed his worst fears. "No, it's bigger than that. Hayes has connections at the highest levels, including influential members of the judiciary who are aligned with corporate interests. They're not going to let you win this easily." Musk's mind raced. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore, it was a fight for the very future of innovation. Hayes's recusal had been a victory, but now Musk had to deal with a much larger and more dangerous adversary, a system that would stop at nothing to protect itself. Musk called an emergency meeting with his closest allies. Kara, his legal team, and several top executives from his companies gathered in a private conference room at SpaceX headquarters. The walls were lined with screens displaying the latest media coverage of the trial, and Musk's thoughts were already running ahead, calculating his next move. "We knew this would happen," Musk began, his voice unwavering. "Hayes is trying to fight back. But we're not just fighting him. We're fighting an entire system that has been rigged to stifle progress. It's not just about me or my companies. It's about everyone who has ever tried to challenge the status quo." Kara was quick to offer a solution. "We need to go public again, Elon. If Hayes is going to fight this, we need to expose the connections that are backing him up. We need to show the world how deep this corruption goes." But Musk was already thinking several steps ahead. "I don't think it's enough just to expose them. We need to find a way to counteract their influence. And that's where things get complicated." The next few days were a blur of meetings, legal strategizing, and media preparation. Musk's team worked tirelessly to compile the most damning evidence they could find, documenting Hayes's ties to major corporate players, particularly those in the fossil fuel industry, who stood to lose billions if Musk's clean energy revolution succeeded. Meanwhile, Musk took to social media, unleashing a barrage of tweets that further fueled the fire. He posted, "The powers that be are not going to let the truth come out easily. The system is rigged to protect the corrupt. It's time to expose the corruption at the highest levels. We must fight for a future where innovation isn't stifled by greed. #expose the corruption #Musk vs. system." The #hashtag Musk vs. system quickly gained traction, and public opinion continued to swing in Musk's favor. People from all walks of life, from tech enthusiasts to environmental activists, rallied behind him. The battle was no longer just a legal matter, it had become a movement, a fight for the future. But just when it seemed like Musk's campaign was unstoppable, the first real blow came. On the day that Musk's legal team was scheduled to file a motion to prevent Hayes's appeal from reaching the Supreme Court, they received a letter from the highest court in the land. The Supreme Court had agreed to hear Hayes's appeal. Musk's stomach dropped as he read the letter. The Supreme Court, the final arbiter in the land, had taken the case, and Musk knew that this was going to be a battle like no other. The news was a punch to the gut for Musk, but it didn't deter him. If anything, it only strengthened his resolve. This wasn't just a fight against a judge anymore. This was a fight for everything he believed in, a future of clean energy, space exploration, and technological advancement. Musk's legal team quickly began preparing for the worst. They had to gather new evidence, stronger evidence, to present before the Supreme Court. They had to expose the corruption at the highest level of the judicial system. They had to fight harder than ever before. Musk stood in front of his team, his eyes burning with intensity. "We've already exposed them for what they are," he said, his voice full of determination. "But now we go one step further. We're not just going to win. We're going to change the game. And we're going to do it by showing the world that they can't silence us anymore." As the case prepared to move to the highest court in the land, Musk knew that he was about to face the ultimate test. He had already been through hell and back. But the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. And he would stop at nothing to ensure that the truth prevailed, no matter what it cost. The atmosphere surrounding the Supreme Court was unlike anything Elon Musk had ever experienced. The world's eyes were now on the case that had begun as a simple legal battle and had escalated into a full-blown political and social war. Every move Musk made, every statement he issued, every tweet he sent, now carried the weight of an entire movement, a movement that wasn't just about a billionaire fighting a corrupt judge, it was about a future where innovation and progress weren't stifled by the status quo. Musk's legal team, now under the intense spotlight of the Supreme Court case, was working tirelessly around the clock. They had to prepare arguments that could not only withstand the weight of legal precedent but also expose the corrupt alliances that had kept Judge Hayes in power for so long. The stakes had never been higher. Winning this case meant securing the future of his companies, the technologies he had spent years developing, and his vision of a cleaner, more advanced world. Losing meant not just the end of this legal battle, but the potential destruction of everything he had worked for. The day of the Supreme Court hearing finally arrived. The halls of the court were buzzing with anticipation, a quiet, electric energy that rippled through the air. Musk stood outside the courtroom, wearing his usual confident expression, though anyone who knew him could see the deep concentration behind his eyes. This wasn't just another business negotiation or a press conference, this was a fight for the very future of humanity. He entered the courtroom with Kara and his legal team by his side. The members of the Supreme Court, seated on their raised dais, watched him with stern expressions, their faces unreadable. Musk had always been able to read people, to sense when they were on the brink of breaking or bending, but this was different. These were the highest judges in the land, with decades of experience, and they were not easily swayed. "We're ready," Kara said quietly, giving Musk an encouraging nod. Musk didn't respond. He was thinking ahead, analyzing every possible scenario. "Let's just get it over with," he murmured, his voice betraying no emotion. The legal team filed their paperwork, and the proceedings began. The first few hours were a blur of legal jargon, procedural debates, and back-and-forth arguments. Musk's team argued passionately about the conflict of interest surrounding Judge Hayes, the hidden corporate ties, and the judge's clear bias. They showed evidence, financial records, secret communications, and testimonies from whistleblowers, each piece of evidence adding weight to their case. But the opposition, led by a team of elite corporate lawyers, wasn't backing down. They argued that the charges were baseless and politically motivated, that Musk was simply trying to discredit the judicial system because he was losing the case. Their defense was powerful, using Musk's own public statements against him, claiming that he was trying to manipulate the court of law for his personal gain. Mr. Musk, one of the justices, finally addressed him. "You've built an empire on challenging the status quo. You've gone to great lengths to make your case in the court of public opinion. But you now stand before this court, and we must ask, do you truly believe you can reshape the judicial system to your will?" Musk met the justice's gaze, his calm demeanor never faltering. "No, Your Honor. I don't believe I can reshape the system. But I do believe that a system that is rigged to favor the wealthy and powerful at the expense of innovation and progress is one that needs to be reformed. We are not just fighting a legal case here, we are fighting for the future. We are fighting for what's right. His words hung in the air, their weight undeniable. A few justices exchanged glances, while others scribbled notes. The tension in the room was palpable. Musk had said exactly what needed to be said, but now the hardest part of the fight lay ahead, the judgment. The following hours were agonizingly slow. Each argument felt like a battering ram aimed at Musk's resolve. Yet, despite the barrage of challenges, Musk and his team never wavered. They fought back with precision, pulling out every piece of evidence and making sure the court understood the gravity of the situation. They presented their case with clarity, each argument tightening the noose around the corrupt practices that had taken root in the legal system. Outside the courtroom, however, things were heating up. The media coverage was intense, with debates over Musk's tactics and his willingness to challenge the very fabric of American justice. Social media exploded with hashtags like #JusticeForInnovation and #MuskVersusCorruption, with people from all walks of life weighing in on the trial. Some were staunchly behind Musk, seeing him as a hero taking on the system. Others, however, believed Musk was too arrogant, too powerful, and too willing to exploit the court system for his own purposes. The lines were drawn clearly now. This case wasn't just about Musk versus Hayes, it was about Musk versus the system, the establishment, and the corporate elite that had kept the status quo intact for so long. As the final arguments drew near, Musk sat silently in the courtroom, his mind running through the arguments one last time. The justices had listened intently, and now the moment of truth had arrived. It was time for the closing statements. Musk's lead attorney stood up, her voice calm but firm as she spoke to the court. "Your Honors, we have shown you the truth. Judge Hayes was not merely a neutral arbitrator in this case. He was a participant in a system that has long favored the interests of the rich and powerful. A system that has allowed corruption and bias to flourish unchecked. Mr. Musk has brought these issues to light because he believes that our system of justice should be better. It should be fair. And it should allow for the progress and innovation that will define the future of this nation. We ask that you rule in favor of fairness, of justice, and of a future where the truth cannot be silenced." The court was silent for a long moment. Musk couldn't help but feel the weight of those words. His future, the future of his companies, and the future of his vision were all in the hands of the justices before him. The question now was whether they would stand with him, or whether they would side with the entrenched powers that had always controlled the system. Finally, the Chief Justice spoke, his voice stern but measured. "We will deliberate. This is not a decision to be taken lightly. The future of the judicial system is at stake here, as is the integrity of the legal process. We will reconvene in 3 days for our final ruling." The court session ended, and Musk stood to leave. His heart was pounding in his chest, but he remained composed, walking with the quiet confidence that had seen him through so many battles before. There was no turning back now. The world was watching, and everything was about to change. 3 days had passed since the Supreme Court hearing, and the world was holding its collective breath. The news had spread like wildfire, and every media outlet, from the smallest blog to the biggest networks, was awaiting the final ruling. Musk's battle against the corrupted legal system had transcended beyond just his personal fight, it had become a symbol of resistance, a war for the soul of innovation and progress. Elon Musk, as always, was no stranger to pressure. He had navigated through countless challenges in his life, from the early days of PayPal to the monumental risks of SpaceX and Tesla. But this was different. This wasn't just a corporate battle or a technological race, this was a fight against an establishment that had been entrenched for centuries. It wasn't just about winning or losing. It was about changing the very fabric of a system that had silenced too many voices before. Musk sat in his private office, staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. He'd been here before. He'd faced near bankruptcy with SpaceX, fought against the automotive giants with Tesla, and even stared down a lawsuit or two from his detractors. But none of those battles had ever been as personal as this. This was a battle not just for his companies, but for a future that embraced the rapid pace of technological change, a future that didn't let corruption stifle progress. "We should be hearing from them soon," Kara said, breaking his thoughts as she entered the room. "It's getting close to the time when the decision will be announced." Musk nodded, but he didn't feel the typical adrenaline rush he was used to before a major announcement. This felt different. He had no control over the situation now. His legal team had done everything they could, presenting evidence, fighting every step of the way, but now it was in the hands of the justices. They were the ones who would decide his fate and, by extension, the fate of his mission. The media was on high alert, and the countdown to the ruling was underway. The world was waiting, and the air was thick with anticipation. Social media was flooded with messages from supporters, some hopeful, others anxious. "This is it, Musk. The world is watching. Whatever happens, we're behind you. Musk is changing the game, whether they like it or not." There were also plenty of detractors, though. Elon Musk is just another billionaire trying to bend the system to his will. He'll lose, and that's a good thing for America. Despite the criticism, Musk remained focused. He knew that people would always have opinions, but the fight he was in now was about more than just winning a court case. It was about reshaping the future, and that mission was far greater than any personal victory. Back in the Supreme Court, the justices were already deliberating. The arguments had been complex, and the evidence presented had shaken the foundation of their understanding of the judicial process. The corruption that Musk's team had uncovered, the ties between Judge Hayes and powerful corporate interests, had raised questions that no one in the court had anticipated. Musk's case wasn't just about one corrupt judge, it was about the broader influence of money and power in the legal system, and the way it could affect the future of the nation. As the justices weighed their options, they knew the decision they were about to make would have far-reaching consequences. Would they stand by the status quo, protecting the interests of the establishment? Or would they choose to act as true stewards of justice, protecting the integrity of the legal system from corruption, and ensuring that it served the interests of the people, not just the powerful? The moment finally arrived. Kara entered Musk's office with a sense of urgency, her face tense as she looked at him. "It's time," she said. Musk followed her into the main conference room, where his legal team was gathered. Everyone was silent, their eyes glued to the large screen in front of them. The moment the Chief Justice's name appeared on the screen, all eyes locked onto the TV. "In the matter of the case of Elon Musk versus Judge Hayes, we have come to a decision." The voice of the Chief Justice echoed through the room, sending a wave of nervous energy through everyone present. The justices began reading their verdict, one by one. The tension was unbearable. Musk clenched his fists, fighting the instinct to pace, to do anything to relieve the pressure building in his chest. Every word, every sentence, carried the weight of his entire mission. "The court has unanimously ruled that Judge Hayes's removal from the case was justified. Evidence presented to this court shows significant conflicts of interest that undermine the fairness of the legal process." The words were like a punch to the gut. Musk's heart raced, and for a moment, he couldn't believe what he was hearing. But it didn't stop there. Furthermore, this court recognizes the need for significant reforms within the judicial system to address the undue influence of corporate interests. While the court does not endorse a complete overhaul of the judicial process, we acknowledge that future cases may require closer scrutiny of potential conflicts of interest and the influence of corporate funding in legal matters. Musk could hardly believe his ears. The words that followed confirmed what he had been hoping for, a ruling in his favor, but with a deeper implication. This was not just a win for him, it was a win for the movement he had started. This was a victory for transparency, for accountability, and for the future of innovation. The room erupted into cheers as Musk and his legal team processed the news. The decision was historic. It had shaken the foundation of the legal system in ways that would take years to fully comprehend. The influence of big money in the legal world had been exposed, and while the court had not demanded an immediate overhaul, it had opened the door for future changes. "This isn't just about us," Musk said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's about creating a world where justice can be blind to power, where progress isn't hindered by those who have the most to lose from it. This is just the beginning." The world reacted to the ruling with overwhelming support. Headlines splashed across major news outlets. "Musk wins landmark case against corruption in the court system," and "Supreme Court rules in favor of innovation, exposing corporate influence," became the rallying cry for those who had long felt that the system was broken. For the first time in a long time, Musk's vision for a cleaner, more advanced world felt within reach. He had not only won a legal battle, he had sparked a movement. A movement that would challenge the old guard, that would break through the walls of bureaucracy and corruption, and open the way for the future. But the victory, while sweet, was just the beginning. The forces that Musk had challenged weren't going to back down easily. He knew that his fight was far from over. In fact, it was only going to intensify. The next chapter in his quest for a better world was already beginning to unfold. The ruling had come down like a thunderclap, echoing through the halls of power and beyond. Musk had won, but the implications of the Supreme Court's decision were only beginning to be felt. The legal and corporate world had been rocked to its core, and the ripple effect of the decision would be felt for years to come. For Musk, the victory was bittersweet. He had spent his entire career pushing the boundaries of what was possible, whether through electric cars, space exploration, or cutting-edge technology. But this was different. This wasn't about technology or innovation. This was about something far more fundamental, the integrity of the system that governed the world. He had challenged the establishment, and now he had won. But the question remained, what came next? Musk sat in his office, staring out the large window that overlooked the city. It was a beautiful view, but today it felt distant, as though the world outside was no longer as important as the battle that lay ahead. The ruling had been a major victory, but it was only a single battle in a much larger war. "What happens now?" Kara asked, stepping into the room. She had been with Musk throughout the entire legal process, and her support had been unwavering. Musk turned to her, his face unreadable. "We keep going," he said simply. "This was just the beginning. The system has been exposed for what it is. Now it's time to make sure we keep the pressure on. This isn't just about removing a corrupt judge. It's about changing the entire system so that people like Hayes can't thrive in it anymore." Kara nodded, but there was a hint of concern in her eyes. "Do you think it's possible? I mean, you've already taken down one of the most powerful people in the judicial system. But now you're talking about something much bigger. Reforming the whole system, that's going to be a fight like nothing we've seen before." Musk looked at her, his eyes hardening with determination. "I didn't come this far to stop now. We've already seen how fragile the system is. There are cracks everywhere, and people are starting to notice. It's time to widen those cracks until they crumble." The aftermath of the ruling was as chaotic as it was predictable. Supporters of Musk hailed the decision as a win for justice, fairness, and the rule of law. They celebrated the fact that the judicial system had been forced to confront its own flaws. People took to social media, chanting for reform, calling for more transparency in the courts, and urging for an end to the undue influence of powerful corporations. At the same time, the opposition rallied just as fiercely. Corporate elites, whose interests had been exposed in the case, began to push back. They were used to having things go their way, and this unexpected defeat stung. In hushed corners of boardrooms and private meetings, there were whispers about how to retaliate. They couldn't let Musk set a precedent. He was a threat to everything they had built. The media, as expected, was divided. Some outlets praised Musk for his courage in challenging the establishment. Others, however, painted him as a dangerous radical, a man who had too much power and too little regard for the status quo. Is Elon Musk above the law? Read one headline. Musk's legal victory, a win for justice or a threat to the judiciary, asked another. As the dust settled, Musk found himself facing not just the corporate giants he had challenged but also a growing political storm. Senators, congresspeople, and even state governors began to weigh in on the issue. Some supported Musk, seeing his case as a chance to push for reform in the judicial system. Others, however, feared what Musk's victory might mean for the future of their own power. If Musk can take down a judge, what's stopping him from targeting us next? One politician was quoted saying in a private meeting. Musk knew that the battle was far from over. Winning the case had put him on the map in a way that was both exhilarating and dangerous. The forces aligned against him were powerful, and they wouldn't take this defeat lying down. But as the political and corporate forces regrouped, Musk had an unexpected ally, the American public. The ruling had sparked a movement, one that saw Musk not as a billionaire trying to bend the system for his own gain, but as a crusader for justice. Thousands of people across the country began to rally behind him, demanding that the government take action to ensure that no judge, no corporation, could ever again manipulate the system to their advantage. Protests sprang up in cities across the country. People marched for judicial reform, calling for greater transparency in the courts and stricter rules around corporate lobbying. The message was clear: the people were tired of being silenced by the powerful few. And they saw Musk as their champion. One morning, a new message from Musk's team appeared on his phone. It was a report from one of the analysts he had working on the case, detailing the reaction to his victory. The analyst's words were simple, but they hit Musk like a ton of bricks: the tide is turning. People are starting to believe in the possibility of change. Musk read the message again, letting the weight of it sink in. Change. It was what he had always fought for, but now it felt more urgent than ever. The system had been exposed. The cracks were wide open. And now it was time to push forward and tear it all down. Later that evening, Musk took to social media to address his followers. The message was direct, and it was clear he was ready for the next step. The fight is far from over. We've taken down one corrupt judge, but that's just the beginning. The system is broken, and it's time to rebuild it from the ground up. We will not rest until the people, every single one of us, has a fair shot. The future belongs to those who are willing to fight for it. And we're just getting started. The post went viral within minutes. Supporters flooded the comments with messages of hope, while detractors lashed out, calling Musk dangerous, a threat to the very fabric of the nation. But for Musk, the message was clear: he was no longer just fighting for his companies. He was fighting for the future. Elon Musk had always been known for taking risks. But this was a whole new level. After the historic victory against Judge Hayes and the sweeping implications it had for the judicial system, Musk realized one undeniable truth: his influence was growing, and with it came an undeniable responsibility. This wasn't just a legal fight anymore. This was a revolution in the making, and he knew that the future of this movement would hinge on the next move. The buzz around his victory hadn't died down. If anything, it had only intensified. Everywhere Musk went, he felt the eyes of the world upon him. It wasn't just the media that was tracking his every step now, it was the very fabric of the establishment he had spent his entire career challenging. Corporate elites, political figures, even world leaders had all begun to take notice. Musk wasn't just a tech mogul anymore, he had become the face of a new, disruptive force that threatened to break the old order. And yet, despite the mounting pressure, despite the political backlash and corporate opposition, Musk was calm. He was ready for what came next. It all began when Musk received an unexpected invitation. The letter, written in formal language and sealed with a thick wax emblem, was hand-delivered to his office by a courier. Kara, who had grown used to the flurry of media requests, legal documents, and investor proposals, looked at the letter skeptically. "What's this?" she asked, raising an eyebrow as she handed the letter to Musk. Musk took the letter and carefully unsealed it. The contents were brief but ominous. Mr. Musk. You are invited to a confidential meeting at the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Conference Center. We believe that you are in a unique position to be an ally in the coming days. Details will be provided upon your arrival. Respectfully. The National Reform Initiative. Musk set the letter down, a glint of curiosity in his eyes. He knew exactly who the National Reform Initiative was, a shadowy group of political insiders, lobbyists, and reformers who had been fighting for years to push through changes in the political system. But they had always been on the periphery, never in the spotlight. What do you think this is? Kara asked, clearly concerned. Musk leaned back in his chair, contemplating. It could be an opportunity. Or it could be another trap set by those who want to stop this movement in its tracks. But we won't know until we show up. 2 days later, Musk arrived in Washington, D.C. The city was buzzing with tension. The air was thick with anticipation, not just over the ongoing political shifts, but also due to the looming possibility of drastic judicial reforms. His presence in D.C. was no accident. Musk wasn't here just to talk. He was here to act. As he entered the Metropolitan Conference Center, a sense of unease washed over him. The building was massive, its high ceilings and elegant design contrasting sharply with the grim, almost covert vibe that filled the air. Musk was escorted down a long, dimly lit hallway by a man in a black suit. They stopped in front of a large conference room, where a group of distinguished individuals were already seated. The room fell silent when Musk entered. At the table sat several influential figures, some of whom Musk recognized immediately: powerful senators, former judges, business magnates, and several well-known activists. All were looking at him with a mix of interest and expectation. Mr. Musk, thank you for coming, the leader of the group, Senator Samuel Walker, said, extending a hand. We've been following your fight, and we believe you are the key to something much bigger than any of us could have imagined. Musk shook the senator's hand, his eyes scanning the room. I'm listening, he replied, keeping his voice steady, but with an underlying intensity. For the next hour, the room was filled with discussions about the future. The National Reform Initiative had been working for years to challenge the very systems that had allowed corruption to thrive in the U.S. legal and political systems. They had spent millions of dollars lobbying for transparency, for limits on corporate donations, and for increased oversight of judicial appointments. But they had failed, until now. With your influence and resources, we can push through the reforms that have been stalled for decades, Senator Walker said. We have the momentum, but we need you on board. The people are on our side now. You've opened the door, and now it's time to walk through it together. Musk sat back in his chair, contemplating the offer. He had always been a disruptor, someone who fought for progress. But now, he realized, he was being asked to take a leap of faith into uncharted waters. The National Reform Initiative wasn't just another political group. It was a collective of people who were tired of waiting, tired of being part of a system that was rigged from the start. After several more hours of debate and discussion, Musk made his decision. He would align himself with the National Reform Initiative. This wasn't just about fighting a single corrupt judge anymore. This was about tearing down the entire system that had allowed corruption to flourish, and rebuilding it from the ground up. And if Musk had learned anything from his time as an entrepreneur, it was that real change only came when you had the courage to take risks. I'm in, Musk said, standing up from his chair. But we need to move fast. There's no time to waste. The room erupted into applause. For the first time, Musk saw the possibility of true change on the horizon, not just for the courts, but for the entire political and legal system. With the National Reform Initiative behind him, Musk had a real shot at reshaping the future. But Musk knew this victory wouldn't come easily. The forces that had worked behind the scenes for years to preserve the status quo were not going to relinquish power without a fight. Musk's next move would have to be calculated, bold, and swift. The time for subtlety was over. As he left the conference room, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from Kara. You made the right choice. But be careful. They're going to come after you harder now. Musk smiled slightly, slipping his phone back into his pocket. Let them come, he whispered to himself. Later that evening, as Musk sat alone in his hotel room, the enormity of what he had just committed to began to sink in. This wasn't just about judicial reform. This was a battle for the soul of democracy itself. The stakes had never been higher. As he looked out over the city lights, he couldn't help but wonder how history would remember this moment. Would he be seen as a hero who fought against the forces of corruption? Or would he be remembered as a reckless man who challenged too much, too quickly? Only time would tell. But Musk was determined to find out. The revolution had only just begun, and he was ready to lead it. Musk's alliance with the National Reform Initiative had created a seismic shift in the political and corporate world. What had once seemed like a singular victory over a corrupt judge was now a full-fledged battle for the very heart of the American system. People across the nation were rallying behind him, but so were his enemies, those who thrived under the status quo, who feared the deep structural changes Musk was advocating. They weren't just going to sit idly by and watch as he dismantled the system they had spent decades building. The moment Musk's commitment to the National Reform Initiative became public, a quiet war began. Corporate titans, deep-pocketed lobbyists, and influential political figures quickly realized that they had underestimated Musk. His legal victory against Judge Hayes had sparked a fire, and the flames were now spreading faster than anyone anticipated. Musk sat in his private office, watching a live broadcast of a prominent political news network. The anchor, a familiar face to most Americans, was reporting on the aftermath of Musk's decision to ally with the National Reform Initiative. The rhetoric from the opposition had already begun to intensify. Elon Musk, a billionaire with too much power, the headline read. The anchor continued, the sudden rise of Musk as a political force has many asking if the entrepreneur is becoming a dangerous figure, too powerful, too influential, and with too little accountability. Critics claim that Musk's recent actions could lead to a radical overhaul of the system that could destabilize the economy, the courts, and even national security. Musk turned off the TV with a swipe of his hand. The media's attacks were predictable. What worried him more were the whispered conversations behind closed doors, the meetings where corporate magnates and politicians plotted their next move. At the same time, a group of high-level strategists and political operatives gathered in a sleek, glass-walled office in Washington, D.C. This was a war room. Inside, the enemy was working on their counterattack, an operation to discredit Musk and dismantle the movement he had begun. Led by Robert Hayes' associates, they were preparing to take Musk down, not just in the courts but in the court of public opinion. Musk's victory may have won him some fans, but it's also painted a target on his back, one of the operatives, a man named Charles Reynolds, said as he stood at the front of the room, flipping through a series of PowerPoint slides. We need to hit him hard, hit him fast, and hit him everywhere. Reynolds was a seasoned political strategist, known for taking down opponents with surgical precision. He had helped topple several public figures and knew that Musk's celebrity and influence made him a particularly dangerous target. First, Reynolds continued, we flood the media with stories of Musk's so-called lack of accountability. We need to remind the public that he's not some folk hero, they'll see him for what he really is, a self-interested billionaire with his own agenda. Second, we need to drag his business dealings through the mud. Find dirt on SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink. We'll make it look like this whole reform movement is just a cover for his personal interests. Third, we'll attack his associates, the people he's working with in the National Reform Initiative. We need to break the coalition, drive wedges between them. The room buzzed with agreement. This would be a multi-pronged assault, a fight not just in the courts, but in the hearts and minds of the American people. Musk was aware of the rising tide of opposition. He had expected it, and he was prepared. But as the weeks went on, the attacks became more coordinated, more vicious. The media unleashed a barrage of negative stories, some true, some exaggerated, and some entirely fabricated. Musk was branded as everything from a fascist to a savior, depending on who you asked. But the most dangerous attacks were those aimed at his credibility and his character. Elon Musk, the billionaire who thinks he can buy a revolution, one headline screamed. Elon Musk's business empire and its ties to global manipulation, said another. Each day brought a new scandal, a new accusation. Musk had been involved in shady international deals, according to one report. Another claimed that he had used insider knowledge to manipulate stock prices. And worst of all, someone leaked a series of emails suggesting that Musk had been using his influence to pressure government officials in ways that were unethical, if not outright illegal. The attacks were relentless, and soon, even the public began to question Musk's motives. Were his actions truly about justice, or was he simply using the system to further his own agenda? Was he really the crusader for fairness that he portrayed himself to be? Musk knew that the key to surviving this onslaught was to control the narrative. He had always been a master of public perception, but this time, the stakes were higher than ever before. He decided it was time to strike back, but not in the way his enemies expected. One night, Musk took to social media, his preferred platform for direct communication. His tweet would be his response to the attacks, and he knew it had to be something bold, something that would capture the world's attention. The truth is, Musk tweeted, "I've been accused of many things in my life. Some of them true, some of them exaggerated, and some of them outright lies. But I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to fight for a future where the system doesn't favor the powerful few. I'm not trying to be a hero, I'm trying to fix a broken system. If that makes me a villain to those who benefit from the old ways, then so be it." The tweet exploded across social media. Supporters rallied behind him, reaffirming their belief that Musk was the one who would lead them to a better future. But his enemies were not silenced. The attacks only grew louder. Within hours, a new report emerged, this time claiming that Musk had attempted to influence a judge's decision in the ongoing case regarding his companies. The evidence, it seemed, was damning. Musk wasn't naive, he knew that the battle for public opinion was just as crucial as the legal fight. His enemies were relentless, but he wasn't about to back down. If anything, this only solidified his resolve. If they want a fight, they've got one, Musk muttered to himself. But I'm not going down alone. I'm bringing the whole system down with me. His next move would be even bolder than the last. He was going to expose the corruption at the heart of his opponents, not just on a corporate level, but on a personal one. Musk had a secret, a file full of information, something he had been saving for just the right moment. It was time to release it. But even as Musk prepared for his next big move, he knew the risks. The enemies he had made were not ones to be taken lightly. The National Reform Initiative was a powerful ally, but their reach could only extend so far. Musk would need to rely on his sharp instincts, his technological genius, and his unshakable will if he wanted to win this war. As the storm of controversy raged around him, one thing became increasingly clear: Musk had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The days following the media blitz had been tumultuous for Musk. His phone rang incessantly, each notification a new flare-up in the battle for control of public opinion. The constant barrage of attacks on his character, his businesses, and his newfound political alliances had created a tidal wave of skepticism. Yet, Musk remained unshaken, a cold determination growing within him. This war was no longer about defending himself, it was about destroying the system that had tried to crush him, and he wasn't going to stop until that system was broken. In the comfort of his private office, Musk stared at his screen. He was preparing for his next move, the one that would send shockwaves through both the corporate world and the political elite. For weeks, he had been sitting on a collection of evidence that, if exposed, could potentially change everything. It was a file, meticulously compiled and cross-referenced, detailing illegal activities, shady deals, and secret alliances between some of his most prominent adversaries. The type of information that could ruin careers and shatter reputations. But Musk wasn't in the business of casual destruction. He needed to ensure that when he unleashed this information, it would be with surgical precision. The world needed to see this for what it was, the culmination of decades of corruption, not just a series of isolated incidents. And it was time for that truth to come to light. That evening, Musk convened a secret meeting with his closest advisors. Kara was, as usual, at his side, looking both worried and resolute. The group gathered around a large, sleek conference table in a darkened room, the glow of their laptops the only source of light. The air was thick with tension as they all knew the gravity of the moment. "Elon, you know what you're about to do is a nuclear option," Kara said, her voice steady but tinged with concern. "Once you release this, there's no going back." Musk glanced up at her, his expression unreadable. "I know. But the stakes have never been higher. These people have been playing this game for too long, and now it's my turn." He turned to the rest of the room. "We're going to expose them. We're going to show the world exactly who they are and what they've been doing behind closed doors. If we don't, then this fight, our fight, was for nothing." Kara leaned forward. "You're right. But this isn't just about exposing them. It's about making sure the truth reaches everyone, every corner of society. If we do this wrong, it'll backfire, and it'll give them the ammunition to destroy you." Musk nodded, understanding the risks involved. The plan had to be flawless. The file he had been holding onto was a carefully crafted masterpiece. It included not only documented evidence of illegal activities but also a deep dive into the connections between key political figures, corporate magnates, and the judicial system. The network of corruption was so intricate that it would be impossible for anyone to ignore once the full extent was revealed. "How do we release it?" one of Musk's aides asked, breaking the silence. "We're going to do it in stages," Musk replied. "First, we leak the key documents to the press, reliable outlets that have the reach to make sure this gets seen. Then, we use our platforms to share the story, piece by piece. There's too much information for one bombshell. We need to let it unfold slowly, so it feels like a constant drip of truth until the whole dam breaks." Musk's plan was bold, but it was the only way to ensure the truth would have its full impact. He knew that if he unleashed everything at once, it would get lost in the noise. But if he allowed the media and public to slowly digest the evidence, the weight of it would build until it was undeniable. The following morning, a series of articles began to surface across the internet. Leading publications like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and even some tech-oriented outlets like Wired began to publish breaking stories. These weren't the typical headlines about Musk's latest business venture or his Twitter antics. This time, the stories were about corruption, stories that painted Musk's enemies in a new light. The first article detailed how an influential corporate magnate, Richard Ford, had funneled millions of dollars into a series of politically motivated deals designed to control key members of the judiciary. The article included email chains, financial statements, and other damning documents, all linked back to Ford's dealings with several high-ranking political figures who had once been close allies of Musk's adversaries. It was a scandal that, until now, had been kept under wraps. Musk watched the reactions unfold as the story went live. The news spread like wildfire. Social media was ablaze with comments, many supporting Musk for exposing the corruption, while others were left stunned at the sheer scale of the conspiracy. But Musk wasn't finished yet. The next day, more documents were released. This time, the focus was on a former U.S. senator who had been receiving substantial kickbacks from defense contractors in exchange for passing legislation that benefited them. A string of high-profile figures, some of whom had been public champions of justice, now found themselves at the center of this storm. Each day, the leaks came faster, each one more damaging than the last. Musk's file was like a carefully crafted puzzle, each piece revealing a deeper level of corruption, each piece leaving the public more enraged. What had once been a whisper of truth was now a full-blown narrative that could no longer be ignored. By the end of the week, the scandal had reached critical mass. News outlets across the country were picking up the story, discussing the web of corruption that Musk had laid bare. Politicians who had once been untouchable were now being scrutinized, their dirty laundry aired for all to see. Business leaders who had long controlled the levers of power were under investigation, their empire slowly crumbling in the face of public backlash. But Musk knew that this was only the beginning. The fight was far from over. The people he had exposed would fight back, there was no doubt about that. And they would have their own means of retaliation. The system would not fall quietly. Musk sat back in his chair, watching the fallout unfold. The weeks of planning, the risks, and the sacrifices, it was all starting to pay off. But even as the public began to rally behind him, he couldn't help but feel the weight of what was to come. He had opened the floodgates, but the battle for justice would be long and hard. "This is just the beginning," he muttered to himself, his eyes fixed on the screen. The storm was far from over, but Musk had no intention of backing down now. The revolution had started, and he was leading it, no matter what it took. The ripple effects of Musk's revelations continued to reverberate throughout the nation. News outlets, political pundits, and citizens alike couldn't stop talking about the massive corruption scandal Musk had unleashed. What had once been whispers behind closed doors was now the loudest conversation in America. Despite the overwhelming public outrage, the elites who had long benefited from the corrupt system weren't about to go down without a fight. Musk's enemies were regrouping, consolidating their power, and preparing for a counteroffensive. This was no longer just a war of public opinion, it had become a battle for the very soul of the American government and corporate structure. Musk sat at his desk, the flicker of his laptop screen illuminating the otherwise dimly lit room. The reports kept pouring in, but there was a consistent theme: his enemies were escalating their efforts. There were whispers of behind-the-scenes meetings, calls for retaliation, and even threats against those involved with the National Reform Initiative. The enemies he had made in the past were beginning to circle the wagons, aligning themselves against him and his vision. "They're not backing down," Elon Musk said, walking into his office with a serious expression. "They're regrouping. We've hit them hard, but now they're fighting back in ways that we didn't expect. There's talk of organizing a counter-revolution, getting key players in Congress and the courts to align against us. They're trying to undermine our credibility, and they've got the full power of the media behind them." Musk's expression hardened. "I know. I expected this. The real battle begins now." Across the country, the backlash was immediate. The elite had quickly learned how to control the narrative. The media, which had once been caught off guard by Musk's revelations, was now in full force, attacking him from all angles. Some outlets questioned the authenticity of the documents Musk had leaked, implying that they were fabricated or manipulated. Others shifted the focus onto Musk himself, questioning his motivations and character. A new smear campaign began: is Musk the true hero, or is he just another power-hungry billionaire? Musk knew that the media was always going to be a double-edged sword. They could help fuel his movement, but they could also turn on him at a moment's notice. What concerned him more, however, was the response of the people who had once supported him. Some, though still loyal, were beginning to grow weary of the constant drama. Doubt was creeping in, and Musk needed to act quickly to regain control of the narrative. He couldn't afford to let this moment slip. On the other side of the battlefield, a secret meeting was taking place. A coalition of powerful adversaries, corporate titans, corrupt politicians, and influential judges, had gathered to strategize. At the head of the table sat Robert Hayes, the man whose career had been nearly destroyed by Musk's campaign. Hayes had become a rallying point for the forces fighting against Musk. He was the perfect symbol, a judge who had once been a pillar of integrity but had been torn down by a powerful billionaire with an agenda. "We can't let him win," Hayes said, his voice tight with frustration. "Musk's revelations have rocked the system to its core, but we still have the power. We've got control over enough key players in Washington, in the courts, and in the media. We've got to rally them and push back hard. Another figure at the table, a prominent lobbyist named Linda Brock, leaned forward. We need to take this fight directly to him, hit him where it hurts. We know he's got allies in the National Reform Initiative, but we can discredit them. We can make them question Musk's real intentions. We start with the courts. If we can get judges on our side, we can start bringing lawsuits, throwing legal challenges in his direction at every turn. Musk, of course, was fully aware of these plans. He wasn't naive. The opposition's reaction was inevitable, and he had already prepared for the next stage of the fight. The question now was how to keep momentum on his side. He knew that the next few months would be crucial. If he didn't keep his supporters galvanized, if he didn't continue to expose the truth and challenge the corruption head-on, then the fight would be lost before it ever truly began. In a quiet moment, Musk stood on the balcony of his private estate, watching the city below. He was alone with his thoughts, a rarity for the busy entrepreneur. His mind raced as he reflected on the path that had led him here. Everything had been building up to this moment. From his early ventures into tech, to his battles with the judicial system, to the fight for justice that had consumed his every waking hour, it all felt like it had been leading him to this exact point. I have to finish this, Musk muttered to himself. There's no turning back. The following week, Musk took to social media once again. This time, however, it wasn't just a tweet. This was an address, a direct message to the people of America. The truth is that the system is broken. The corruption in our government and corporate structures has been allowed to fester for far too long. And while the powers that be may fight to maintain their stranglehold on the system, they cannot stop the tide of change. What I've exposed is only the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more that needs to be brought into the light. But this fight isn't just mine, it's all of ours. It's about the future of our country, and we cannot let them win. Musk's words were deliberate, calculated. He knew this was his moment to reignite the fire in his supporters. And it worked. The public rallied. Protesters flooded the streets, calling for systemic change. The National Reform Initiative, which had once been a small, obscure group, was now a force to be reckoned with. People from all walks of life began to join the movement, lending their voices to the cause. Musk's enemies, however, weren't backing down. They escalated their efforts, using every tool at their disposal to discredit him, challenge his every move, and undermine his credibility. But Musk was prepared. The truth, he knew, would always win in the end. One night, as Musk sat in his office reviewing the latest legal documents, a message popped up on his screen. It was from an anonymous source, someone deep within the opposition's ranks. They're planning a major legal challenge to your movement. The key is a judge they've been working with, a judge you know all too well. They're ready to use everything they have to stop you. Musk's eyes narrowed. The source was clear, his old adversary, Robert Hayes, was gearing up for one final strike. It was now or never. I won't let them win, Musk muttered. He stood, determined and resolute. This was the moment. The fight was far from over, but Musk was ready for the next phase. The war for justice was intensifying, and he would not back down. The war had been raging for months, with neither side giving an inch. Musk's relentless pursuit of justice had cracked open a hidden world of corruption, and his enemies were now fighting back harder than ever. The legal battles had begun, the media had doubled down on its smear campaigns, and the public was becoming more divided than ever. Every move Musk made was scrutinized, and every counterattack against him was met with more resistance. But Musk had anticipated this. What was about to unfold was the culmination of everything he had worked for, his final stand against a system that had tried to destroy him. The stakes were higher than ever, and he knew the outcome would shape the future for not only him but for the entire nation. The final showdown had begun. Musk had been summoned to court, not just for himself but for the entire movement he had started. The National Reform Initiative was under fire, and the corrupt elites knew that this was their last chance to bring it all to a halt. The courtroom was packed, the media at full attention. The case was complex, filled with legal jargon and murky details, but the core of it was clear: Musk had exposed a deeply entrenched network of corruption, and now his enemies were using their legal power to strike back. The key figure behind this final assault was none other than Judge Robert Hayes, the man who had once presided over many of Musk's earlier cases and had been at the heart of the campaign to destroy his reputation. As Musk entered the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric. The public had rallied behind him, but there were still many who saw him as the villain, an overpowered billionaire out to manipulate the system for his own gain. His enemies had successfully painted him as a dangerous disruptor, someone willing to burn everything to the ground to get what he wanted. But Musk wasn't interested in being the hero. He was here to bring the system to its knees. The trial began, and the tension was palpable. Musk's legal team, led by the sharp and unflinching attorney Marcus Green, had prepared for this moment for weeks. Every angle had been covered, every piece of evidence analyzed. Musk had one goal in mind: to expose the truth, no matter the cost. "Your Honor," Marcus Green began, standing tall before Judge Hayes, "the evidence we've presented here is irrefutable. We've shown, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the people behind this conspiracy have manipulated the courts, manipulated the media, and corrupted the very foundation of our government. These are not just isolated incidents, this is a coordinated effort to control the nation's power." Judge Hayes, sitting at the bench, remained stoic, his face a mask of authority. He had already made his position clear during pretrial proceedings, aligning himself with the forces opposed to Musk and his reform efforts. It was clear that he would do everything in his power to ensure that Musk was defeated. Musk's eyes met the judge's, and for a moment, the room seemed to freeze. The disdain between them was palpable. Musk knew that Hayes was not just an obstacle, he was the embodiment of the corrupt system Musk had spent months trying to dismantle. This would be a fight to the finish. The proceedings dragged on for hours, with each side presenting their arguments. Musk's enemies tried to discredit him at every turn, painting him as an opportunist, a billionaire playing a dangerous game. But Musk wasn't backing down. His team was relentless, presenting the full weight of the evidence and showing how deep the corruption ran. The breakthrough came when Musk's legal team presented a document, a smoking gun, if you will, showing direct communication between Judge Hayes and several corporate executives involved in the corrupt schemes Musk had exposed. The email threads and financial transactions left little room for interpretation. Hayes had been working behind the scenes to ensure that the status quo remained intact. This was the moment. Musk's enemies had been blindsided. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters scrambled to get a shot of the document, and the judge's face turned red with fury. He had been caught, and there was no escaping the truth now. Musk's legal team had proven that Hayes was a key player in the conspiracy. The tides had shifted, and the system that had been so carefully constructed to protect the corrupt elite was now unraveling before everyone's eyes. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. That evening, as Musk sat in his office, a message appeared on his phone. It was a report on the day's events in the courtroom. The document included a copy of the email thread that had sealed Judge Hayes' fate. The message came with a note: "The backlash is coming. They're not going to let this go without a fight. You've exposed them, but now they'll do everything they can to bury you." Musk knew that the battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. His enemies would fight back. They had the resources, the power, and the influence to drag this out for years. But Musk had one advantage they didn't: he had the truth on his side. "They can try to bury me," Musk muttered to himself, "but the truth will rise." The next day, the media frenzy began again, but this time it was different. The focus wasn't just on Musk, it was on Judge Hayes. Investigations were launched into his actions, and the floodgates of corruption had been fully opened. As the story spread, more and more figures within the political and corporate world were implicated. The revelations were explosive, and people began to demand accountability. The public, once divided, now rallied behind Musk, seeing him as a symbol of resistance against a broken system. But even with the media coverage, Musk knew that the real fight had only just begun. The court's decision was coming soon, and with it, the final verdict on his future, and the future of his reform movement. As the days ticked down to the final decision, Musk spent his time meeting with his closest allies, strategizing the next phase of the fight. The stakes had never been higher, and Musk knew that whatever happened in the courtroom, he couldn't stop now. The momentum was on his side, and he would continue to push forward, no matter what. His eyes were on the horizon. This battle would define everything. The system might be broken, he thought, but I'm going to fix it. One way or another. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?